Well, good morning, church. It's good to be here with you this morning. Sorry, I should have waited on a response. Typically, when I say good morning, church, there's not a response, but good morning, church. So this is National Adoption Month, and we're grateful to, or National Adoption Awareness Month, and we're grateful to be here with you. This is something that we're passionate about, and we're just excited to share a little bit with you about some of the needs and a little bit about Pure Gift of God and all that good stuff. So my name is Larry. Yoder is my wife Amanda, and we have the privilege of being the executive directors of Pure Gift of God. And we're here. We have 4 wonderful children. They're 10, 9, 4, and 3. And our oldest 2 came, our biological, and our youngest 2 came to us through adoption. So this is something that we're really passionate about. We have a picture of our family up here somewhere. You want to put that up? And we also
they're sitting in the back. And my parents are here with us too, so we're really grateful for them and all of their support.
They came along to help us wrangle our children. So many of you are familiar with Pure Gift of God. We provide grants for families that are adopting all across the United States, as well as providing local support for foster and adoptive families. So Kurt and Erica Yoder started Pure Gift back in 2013, and along with the board of advisors, and actually we have a few board members here with us this morning, and you guys all know Angela Schleybaugh, and we have Greg and Joanna, and actually, oh yeah, they can stand up. Come on, guys. Yeah, go ahead. They've done it. They've done amazing work with Pure Gift, and we're really grateful for them. Actually, Ange and Joanna are actually on staff as well. Ange is our family coordinator, and Joanna is our special events and fundraising coordinator. So we're really grateful for them and their family. They're a huge blessing to Pure Gift of God. So we want to share a little bit with you this morning about some of the needs with vulnerable children and in the adoption and foster care world, and give you some ideas of how you can get involved. So as we think about, this month being National Adoption Awareness Month, it's a month that we set aside to really think about the needs and then also figure out how we can partner with God to meet those needs. Because God uses people, right? He likes to use us, me and you, to take care of the needs of vulnerable children. So as we talk about some of the needs this morning, we have a question for you. So the question this morning is, what is God asking you to say yes to today? So what is God asking you to say yes to today?
All right, so before we get into some of those needs, I wanted to share a little bit with you about adoption and the early church. This is something that I just recently discovered. Someone sent me a teaching from a lady named Christy McClellan. She is a Bible scholar and a professor and just very knowledgeable about the early church. And when Larry and I heard this teaching, we were like blown away and just wanted to share a little tidbit of that with you this morning. So a lot of you may know that believers were first called Christians in a city called Antioch. And it talks about this in the book of Acts. And Antioch, it was actually called Antioch on the Orontes. And the Orontes was this big river that flowed. And because the city was right along the river, it was a large city, wealthy, just a lot going on there. It was prosperous. It was under the Roman rule, though, and so the religion there was very pagan, and there was a lot of, religious rituals they would do, and really, they would pray to goddesses and have these different things. So it was there in the midst of this that believers were first called Christians. And there were a few things that the Romans noticed about the believers, and they said, these people are different. These are the ones that are the Christ followers. And so there were 3 things. I'm just going to quickly go through them. The first thing was that they refused to participate in the religion of the empire. So they refused to do these pagan rituals and chose to follow God's way instead. And so the Romans took notice of this, and they said, like, these people are not following the way that we're following. So because of that, there was a lot of persecution, and that brings us to the second thing, is that even in the midst of the persecution, they were not afraid of death. So obviously the Romans really took notice of that as well. Like, wow, these people are different. They are not even afraid of death. And then the third thing is that they participated in the ministry of adoption. And I didn't even know this was part of the early church, but it was. Because of the religion, they would have these temples and would pray to goddesses, and there was a lot of temple prostitution that would happen. And sometimes these women who participated in that would become pregnant, and they would actually bring their babies to the temple steps and just leave the babies on the steps to die. And it was the believers that would go. And they would get up in the night often, and they would go to the temple steps, and they would take the babies and, bring them home and adopt them. They would give them a name. They would bring them into their family and raise them as their own. And that's how adoption was part of the early church. And so it was one of those key things that the Romans noticed and said, these people are different. And they did this because they believed in the value of every child, and because they believed so deeply in God's restoration power. And, adoption looks very different in this day and age, and thank goodness, but we can still have that same heart that says, we believe and we see the preciousness of every person, the value of every child, and that we believe in the redemption and restoration that only God can bring into some of the situations that are very heartbreaking in our world.
Yeah, and it's really cool how in the beginning of, in the early church, their mission and their calling, they were first called Christians because of these things. The same calling that they had back then of, not being conformed to this world, taking care of orphans and widows, that same calling is still in the church today. It's still the same calling that we have today. And it's really cool to see how the early church and the church now, it's the same call. It's the same deal. It's really cool.
Right. So back in Antioch and then throughout the whole Bible, we see God's heart for vulnerable people, and especially for vulnerable children. And it really is such a privilege to see the ways that God has moved in the past, and even today, how he's still moving. And he is, working things together. He's providing. He's bringing healing for children who come from hard places. And the cool thing is that he's doing that through us, through people, like you and like me. And, we recognize that not everyone will be able to foster and adopt, but we still believe that everyone has an important role to play. And so the key is just asking God, what do you have for me? What is God asking you to say yes to today? I wanted to share a really quick story. This is just a cool way of just showing God's care and his involvement in our lives. There was a local family recently who became licensed to foster in our community, and very soon, I think it was just a few days after they got their license approved, they brought a placement of 3 children into their home. And then a few months after that, they brought another sibling, a newborn baby, into their home. And I don't know how many of you were impacted at all by the formula shortage that's been going on, but this family was really struggling to find formula for the baby. And they needed a particular type of formula to help support the growth needs of this baby. And so it was around that time that someone came to our office and donated a box of formula and baby food. Just were like, we don't even know who it was because we were out of the office when this happened. But they donated a box of formula, and Larry reached out because he knew that the husband had been actually driving at one point to different Walmarts and Targets and trying to find this formula. And so he reached out, and here it ended up being the exact type of formula that this family needed for the baby. So it's just such a big blessing to them and such an example of the way that God is moving, and he is inviting us to get involved. And it might not be, it could seem small, but you never know what a huge blessing it might be to a family.
Yeah, that family that fostered, I mean, that's no joke. I mean, they went from no kids to 4 kids in a matter of, I think it was a month and a half or so, something like that. And it's so cool that, someone decided to donate something, and this family needed that very exact thing. And it's so cool that how God can use something so simple. A lot of times we don't even understand, or we don't even realize the significance of that little thing that God nudges us to do. Or, it could be something so meaningful, and we don't even know. We don't even find out the end result. Like that family never knew the end result of that formula. Just like so many other things that we do in life. I mean, when we just make ourselves available and open to what God is prompting us to do, we don't know the impact and the impact that that's going to make.
Right, and the great thing is that you don't have to be special. You don't have to have some huge calling from the Lord. Just that God is looking for our willingness and our availability to him, and then that heart to serve others. And so even if you don't have a ton of resources or feel like some major calling in your life, like God is inviting all of us to participate, and it's such a privilege.
So as we talk about serving vulnerable children today, I want to make it very clear that it's not just about us giving to them. It's not, it's about us serving and loving these children, and we end up benefiting so much with having them in our lives. It's an absolute privilege to be able to serve and love children in this capacity, and we gain so much. These are incredible children who deserve nothing but the best, and we as parents are the lucky ones. Whether it's having them in our homes, in our families, for a week, or for a month, or forever, they're such a blessing, and it's such an honor. And even when hard things do come up, we know that it stems from trauma, and which is not their fault. And the reality is we can have hard stuff come up with our biological children, but it's such a privilege to be able to provide a safe place for healing and restoration, and just a safe, loving, caring place for them. Like I said, whether it's for a few days through foster care or forever through adoption, it's really a privilege, and it's always worth it. One of my favorite scriptures is in Matthew 25, and we have it up on the board here, and I want to just read over it. It talks about when we serve people that we really are serving Jesus. So Matthew 25, 37 through 40 says, "Then the godly will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty and give you food or something to drink? When did we see you with no place to stay and invite you in? When did we see you poorly clothed and cover you? When did we see you sick and tenderly care for you, or in prison and visit you?' And the king will answer them, 'Don't you know? When you cared for one of the least of these, my little ones, my true brothers and sisters, you demonstrated love for me.'" And I believe that caring for children is one of the most tangible ways to serve Jesus. And that's one of my favorite verses. So here are some of the needs in the world right now. And the sad reality is that there's millions of children all around the world, including in our own backyards, that are growing up without family. And there's also children that are growing up in absolutely horrific circumstances in families that have or will be removed and placed into foster care. And this often because the parents of these children have also suffered abuse and trauma in their lives. It's really sad. There's over 16,000 children in the foster care system in Ohio alone. There's only around 7,200 foster families to meet that need. And for around 3,200 of these children, their parents' rights have been terminated, and they're open for adoption. Most of them are sibling sets or teenagers. And there are around 1,000 teens that age out of the foster care system in Ohio every year. And that's not okay. When they age out and they're out on their own, it's hard enough to grow up, there's challenges that we face when we grow up with, one or two parents. But imagine not having that. Like, we're created for relationship. We're created for community. We're created for family. Like, God created us for family. There's a special need for older children, for sibling sets, whether that's adopting or fostering or mentoring. And unfortunately, there's such a negative stigma around foster teens, which is also heartbreaking, because their situation is not their fault. It's not their fault that they were taken from their home and placed into a family that they've never met. It's not their fault. And when things do come up, they're trying to figure out how to survive. They're trying to figure out how to navigate through life and how to make sense of their world. They're trying to figure out how to get their needs met. Maybe they've never been able to have their needs met. And they're just trying to figure that out. Before we just jump into the next thing, I want to take a little bit of time here. These statistics, it's easy to just read over these numbers and not really think about what these numbers actually mean. I want to make it real for each one of us. You probably have a child in your life that you care deeply for. And I want you to take a minute and think about this child that you really care deeply for. Can you imagine them not having the simple things that we take for granted every single day? No child should ever have to wonder if they'll have a family to belong to. A mom and a dad to love them unconditionally. A safe home to live and to grow up in. No child should ever have to struggle to survive and just to try to get their core longings met. And it's not okay. No child should ever have to do that. No child should ever have to go through that. Those thoughts should never have to cross their minds. And if I were to say today that there's one child in foster care, or there's one child up for adoption, with their parents' rights terminated, longing for a family to belong to, that would be too many. And no, there's not one, there's 16,000 children. That's just in Ohio alone. That's enough to fill up about half the seats at Progressive Field. And no, there's not one up for adoption. There's around 3,200. Each one with a name, a purpose, a calling, a spirit inside of them created in the image of God Himself. So one is too many. What would you do for your child if they were in that situation? What do you think God's heart is for these children? Psalms 127, you can pull it up on the screen, is a verse that I believe that really captures God's heart for children as well. It says, children are a gift from the Lord, a reward from him. So no matter if a child comes into your home through adoption, through foster care, or biologically, these children are a gift and a reward from him. And God doesn't give gifts unless they're extravagant and incredible. These are gifts from God, rewards from him, and they're amazing. James 1:27 says that pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. I know that as a father, this would be at the top of my list, to make sure that my children are taken care of. And it's cool, James 1:27, caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you, just like in the beginning what Amanda shared with the early church. This was their call. It's still our call today. It's our joy, it's our privilege to do this. So these are some of the needs of vulnerable children, and we want to talk to you now about some of the needs that arise after children are placed in homes. So as families say yes to the need that they see in front of them, there are some challenges that can come up. So many of you know that adoption is a financial sacrifice. And it can often be one of the first hurdles that families face. And you're talking about $20,000 to $60,000, depending on the type of adoption that you're looking into. We had a really cool story just maybe like 3 weeks ago, something like that I want to share with you. It's one of my favorites, and we had a family that we had given a grant to in 2017 when they adopted their daughter, and then a grant in 2020 when they adopted their son. And they reached out to us the other week and said, hey, we have a circumstance here that we need help with. And their agency had reached out to them, and the birth mom of their daughter that they adopted in 2017 was pregnant again. And they wanted to adopt a sibling for their daughter. The problem was that they had just adopted in 2020, and were not planning on adopting again, and the cost for the adoption was going to be a little over $40,000. And they were not able to bring that child into the home to be able to bond with that child until they could prove that they could pay for this adoption, which is another story in itself, which we're not going to go there today. But so this family was all of a sudden like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And so they reached out and said, hey, we don't have time to go through the process of, getting our home study together. They just found out about this the week prior, and the birth mom actually had the baby already. And so they were in a spot where they really needed help. And so we reached out, we put the word out to our board, our staff, we talked about it, and we were like, man, we need to do something right away for this family. And it took me right back to about 3 years ago. We had a similar situation come up where we had just adopted our daughter, Eva, 10 months prior, and we got a phone call from our agency saying that Eva's birth mom was pregnant again and wondered if we would be open to adopting. And we had, like I said, just 10 months prior adopted and had used up all of our finances, went in debt. We were not financially ready at all in any way for this. And Amanda and I were in bed one night, and I was sleeping, but Amanda was awake, and she was like, okay, God, we talked about it earlier that day, and like, I know that there's agencies out there that help families with finances when they adopt. So Amanda was on her phone looking at some different organizations and came across one that God highlighted to her, and ended up reaching out the next day and explaining our circumstance. And it was similar. Like, we didn't have our home study together. We didn't have, we couldn't wait for another 6 weeks or 6 months, whatever it was, for the next review. Long story short, they ended up calling us back a few days later to let us know that they could give us $10,000 towards our adoption. And the cool thing was that just a day or two after this lady reached out to Pure Gift, I was able to call her to let her know that we can give them $10,000 towards their adoption. And it was really just kind of a full circle moment where, like, we've been on the receiving side of this, where we were in desperate need of help. And then to be with an organization that can be on the giving side of this and having resources to be able to do the same for another family was really something I'll never forget. And it just goes to prove that time and time again that God provides. And if you're sitting here today and God's calling you to adopt, then the finances, God will take care of that. We just need to put our trust in Him and believe that He cares. And, that could look different for each circumstance, but we know that God loves to provide, and He will. There's another thing that's so valuable for foster and adoptive families, and that's having people around you that kind of have walked the same journey as you, and someone to really relate to. And that's one of the main reasons that we started support groups, and the foster parent support groups have been particularly fascinating for me. It's really incredible to see families get together and really support each other. And we have families that come that just started fostering, and we have others that have fostered for a long time, and it's really neat to see them really supporting and ministering to each other. And it's so valuable. And the cool thing is that, just because if you're sitting here today, like, well, what does that mean for me? If I haven't fostered or adopted, can I support someone like that? And the truth is yes, because some of the most supportive people on our journey have not fostered or adopted, but they've made themselves available and just been there when we needed them. So that's really cool. You can just make yourself available and be there and show up when a family needs something and support in that way.
Right. It kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier with the willingness, the availability, and just that heart to serve others. And yeah, we've been so grateful for the people that have been that support system for us. When we talk about the needs that come after placement and even after adoption, I think sometimes when we think about adoption, it's easy to look at finalization as the finish line. It's like, when you stand in court, in a courthouse before a judge, and they say, this child will be, in your family forever. It's easy to feel like, oh, well, that's the finish line. But no, the truth is, that is really just the first step of a lifelong journey. And, our heart is to really help and support and see families through that whole journey. What we've seen is that for children who come from harder places like that they often need therapy to help make sense of their story and really learn how to form healthy attachment. And so we're excited with Pure Gift of God that we've been able to open the Connection Center. It's a therapy center where we can provide services for children who have come from those harder places. And, we just want to give them the tools to help them thrive, to help them find healing, to make sense of their story, and just to learn those skills and tools so that they can grow and live a successful and healthy life and learn how to develop healthy relationships and all of those things. So that's a really exciting part of what we do with Pure Gift of God. And we're excited because we just hired another therapist, so we'll be able to provide even more of those services. And I helped with some of the groups that we did this summer, therapy groups, and with the children, and it was so fun and hilarious, and just some of the things that the kids would say, and the fun activities we got to do. It was great. So children with trauma in their history, we know that they may have medical needs, developmental needs, extra needs at school. If you're an educator in here, just thank you. You have such a unique opportunity to speak into the lives of these children and to be a person who believes in them and create a place for them in school that is safe and that where they feel seen and valued. It's been exciting for us to connect with teachers and educators who are excited about understanding and doing that, providing that space for children. We touched on some of the needs of foster families, but because of the way that children can come into their home so quickly, there are some unique needs, just some of those practical needs like high chairs and car seats and cribs and all of that kind of thing. And so, yeah, being able to help step in and provide those things is really, it can make a huge difference for families. We recently had a family reach out. They had two girls coming into their home through the foster care system. They were ages 12 and 16, and they came into the home with just all of their belongings thrown into garbage bags. And we were able to provide some suitcases, just some nice luggage for them to put their things into. And I think sometimes we underestimate those practical things that we can do to show care and to show love, and it can speak volumes for a child who is in a really tough place.
Yeah, something about that really hit me when I got that message about the two girls, and it's like, coming into care, getting taken out of their homes, and having nothing but trash bags to put their belongings into, to take them with them, it was really heartbreaking to me. It was like, no 12-year-old and 16-year-old girl should ever have to go through that. And it was really cool. I was able to reach out to a couple local businesses and get really nice luggage for them, and get some bags together, and nicer luggage than I've ever owned. It was really special to be able to provide something above and beyond for these girls. It's really meaningful for them.
Right. And so you can find out, I would encourage you, excuse me, I know you have foster families amongst you in this church and in your community. Finding out who those people are and just make yourself available. Listen to what God is nudging you to do. Maybe it would be dropping off a meal or just a phone call to say, how are you doing? And being like a non-judgmental, just ear to listen to what they're going through. You could mow their yard. You could help with childcare. Childcare is a huge deal. And so making yourself available for that. You can be another positive adult in this child's life who speaks life into them and who loves and accepts them. Another thing that happens in foster care that we don't always think about is that there is a lot of grief involved. Not only are these families walking with a child through a really difficult season of their life, but also, we celebrate reunification when a child can go back to their biological family, when that's safe and possible, because that is what a picture of restoration and redemption, and to be able to walk with families who are maybe going through a difficult season and need some extra help so that they can be healthy for their children. We want to be able to do that. But then there is also grief on the other side for foster families when children that they've bonded with do go back. And so just being aware of some of these things, we can step in and be supportive for families as they walk this out.
Yeah, and one more thing with that. So a lot of times what I've found is that foster families are not quick to ask for help. And so I always say that if you want to reach out and help a foster family, then rather than saying, hey, let me know when you need something, or if you ever need anything, just give me a call. The reality is that they're probably not going to reach out. When they're in the midst of really hard stuff, they're probably not going to pull out, their list of people that said that they would help and reach out. They probably won't. So the better thing is to say, hey, what do you need right now? How can I serve you right now? Or just show up, like Amanda said, with a meal, show up and take their kids for the afternoon, whatever that might look like. But rather than saying, hey, let me know when you need something, let's be proactive and say, hey, what do you need right now? Like, what can I do for you right now? Because we do need to help them, and we do need to be able to provide that support, and it's so valuable. Just making yourself available. It's amazing what making yourself available can do, and how valuable that can be for families. So as we wrap it up today, the question isn't, whether or not you're called to do something, but what is God asking you specifically to say yes to? Because we're all called to this, right? And we're the church. We're all called to take care of the orphans, to take care of vulnerable children. We're all called to that. But what is God specifically asking you to say yes to? It could be yes to foster or adopt. It could be yes to mentoring children. We know that the children's home in Worcester has a mentor program for foster children. You can mentor a child. You can serve foster families in your community, like we just talked about. And we know that your church does really well. We've heard stories of your church doing really well with that, so thank you for that. And we know that your church is full of foster and adoptive families, which is really cool. You could give financially. You could give your time to volunteer at one of our events or support groups. You can become a prayer warrior and dedicate to praying for these families. So valuable. You can volunteer at places like, I know we have Foster Our Community, and the Christian Children's Home of Ohio in Worcester. Find a place to plug into. Find a place to volunteer at. So what's your yes today? What do you feel God tugging at your heart to say yes to today? And I want you to take time with this, and whether it's today or this week, just be praying and asking Jesus to speak to you. It might look different, or it will look different for each person, but we want to encourage you to make yourself available because we never know what God's going to do with our yes. And we are the church, right? This is what we get to do. We're the church. We get to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We get to be encouragement to people around us. We get to do this stuff. So, what's your yes look like? I know that Joanna and Carter, thanks Carter for all your hard work. Carter's been manning the table back there.
Carter's awesome.
We'll be around. If you guys have any questions or want to connect in any way, you can meet us at the back table or you can reach out. You can reach us at info@puregiftofgod.org, or you can find us on our website at puregiftofgod.org. But thank you for your time today, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. So that's all we have. Thank you.
Sometimes when I look out at the world